we were talking about the reasons that Great Britain had become this massive power in world affairs. And now we want to talk about another byproduct or something that happens as a result of that, and it's going to make them even more powerful. Great Britain becomes the unofficial economic center of the world. And because of what they're going to do in the 19th and early 20th centuries, nations are going to be able to cooperate better, and business is going to move faster and more reliably. Excuse me. One of the things Great Britain does, and they convince other nations to eventually adopt this as well, is they adopt the use of what we call the gold standard. Gold is something that is universally recognized by modern nations and really throughout time. Civilizations have always recognized that gold was something of value, something of importance. And so ultimately, Great Britain says, listen, what we're going to do is take our currency, the British pound, and create an exchange rate that so many ounces of gold will be exchanged or redeemable for 1 British pound. And so they create an exchange system. And that exchange system is something that they convince other nations to adopt as well. Now, there's a number of reasons why they differ, but to make a very long story short, Great Britain's exchange rate of 1 pound for a certain amount of gold at the time created more stability and trustworthiness. And so, for example, you knew if somebody paid you with British pounds that that was going to be worth a certain amount of gold. Back then, the exchange rates didn't change very often, and so if somebody gives me a British pound, I know that I'm going to be able to redeem that for a certain amount of gold. There are expressions that come from that. For example, you've ever heard of something as good as gold? That was the reference that a British pound was as good as gold. So ultimately, this gold standard allows people to have more faith in doing that. So if somebody wants to buy something from me in British pounds, I knew precisely what it would be worth in gold and that the British government would be willing to redeem it. On top of that, when other nations create their own fixed exchange rate to a number of ounces of gold, you knew precisely what you were getting. So if you're not on that gold standard, that might vary. Somebody might try to hand you worthless paper money. Right? So that gold standard is going to be important. Great Britain not only gets the gold standard to help facilitate international business. So, for example, when I'm selling to somebody overseas, they know what I'm giving them is worthwhile. Now, not only did Great Britain facilitate the gold standard, the use of the gold standard, they also brought in what were called letters of credit. If somebody was an international purchaser and they wanted to buy something from you, they would arrange for a letter of credit from their bank. And so, for example, I get a letter of credit. Somebody wants to buy, let's say, 10 tons of cotton from me. And if they want to buy 10 tons of cotton and we come up with a fixed price, and we know that prices of currency are connected to gold, and theirs comes from, let's say, the Central Bank of Belgium. That's a government operated bank, and I know that they're going to give me an exchange rate that is worth what it is I'm getting. So it's almost like in a form of a contract or a promissory type of note. It's the same way that today, when you go to buy a house, you'll get a letter from the bank saying you're authorized to get this much money to purchase a home. All right. Now, Great Britain, because of that, their banks, the sound nature of the British pound, they start issuing the British banks start issuing loans and letters of credit to other nations, and they allow British companies to invest in other parts of the world, and it speeds up the process. Maybe before this, you could actually get a bank in another country to do business with you, but it might take a lot more time. So Great Britain, it comes to be the place where everybody goes in terms of getting deals done or business done. Many of the nation's most important banking houses are there, and the fact that the British economy is so good means that they have a sound form of currency. Not only that, but they were probably getting more gold in as well. Now, we don't use that gold standard today, but there were reasons why they used it back then. All right, so Great Britain is this powerful nation. They have a strong navy, they've got strong industry, a strong financial system. Let's take a look at France. France is another major colonial power, And Great Britain was really colonizing for natural resources. But France, it's not like they didn't want the resources, but they're colonizing a little bit for different reasons. They look at the nations of Africa here, and you can see the bluish colored areas. They look at this particular region and they say these people need to be civilized. We have a duty to civilize our fellow man. Now, how much they really believe that or not is hard to tell. They definitely took the resources from it too, but many people took this seriously, saying we need to get these human beings on a higher level. Okay, not only is France going to colonize huge chunks of Africa, but they're also going to move over here to what we call French Indochina. You can see that in the little globe down there, that little green area, that Indochina is in Southeast Asia. The French called it Indochina because it was between India and China. I know, it's pretty amazing, right? And you can see that little region, a close-up shot in the little map to the right, and it tells you the time frames, the years in which the French start colonizing that particular area. Indochina has a couple resources that are valuable, including indigo and rice. If you don't know, indigo is a plant that produces that bluish dye that we use in blue jeans and other clothing all the time. Okay, so France is expanding outward, they're colonizing. They had some problems internally as well, but their colonization is definitely on par with Great Britain. They're not there, but they're comparable. The colonization is occurring, they're getting the resources, but France has some other issues to contend with as well at the time. And one of their major problems is that France had this massive fear of their neighbor Germany. Now, we're going to talk about this more in depth when we get to Germany in the next section. But you see right here, there's Paris, France, the capital. You can see in the center in the little blue region. And you see Germany over there to its east. And France is very fearful because Germany is a powerful nation on the rise. Like I said, we'll talk about it more in depth, but Germany wanted to rival Great Britain as the most important nation in the world in dominating world affairs. And Germany is gobbling up land. They're bringing more nations into the fold. And they also defeated France in a war in 1871. We'll mention that Franco-Prussian War. And you see the area in pink right there, Alsace-Lorraine. That was a region that France had to surrender as a result of losing a war to Germany, and they're very bitter about it. France has had a number of political problems over time. They had been a monarchy, then they switched to a democracy, then they went back to a monarchy, and by the end of the 19th century, they're a democracy again, but it's a very fragile democracy, and it's also a democracy that is marked by lots of corruption. Even though there's good things going on within France at the time, like Eiffel and the Tower and the World's Fair and the Impressionism and the culture, France is often preoccupied with fear of their German neighbors, and rightfully so. And you have to realize, too, that France, they're going to be looking for friends who can help protect them from their German neighbors. Okay? And we'll talk about that as we talk about Germany in our next video.